Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of AI Insights with me, Jonathan Blaber, the head of AI practice, connecting our clients with the most in-demand AI talent. I designed this podcast series to help really give businesses and department leaders the latest insight into the current AI trends. Insight into AI transformation, no matter how big, how small you're looking to do. I think these topics are really, really relevant right now to grasp what's going on. So today's episode, we'll be talking about data leadership in the age of Gen AI. So covering topics like how the leadership role is evolving within AI and how we can ensure AI aligns with organization strategy. Okay, so with us today, we have a very special guest. She has held roles as CDO for the likes of Heineken, Barclays Security. She has over 30 years of experience in building value and deepening customer engagement and impact with data and digital solutions. So welcome to the show, Elisabeth Osta.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and thanks for having me.
You are more than welcome. We actually don't know each other too well. We met online, didn't we, a few weeks ago? And I'm just so surprised how helpful the data community is in sharing knowledge and trying to kind of get everyone up to speed. And you gave me a lot of insight into the AI world and what's happening and what's coming. So it was a no-brainer to invite you to the show. And I'm sure our listeners will be really, really interested to hear what you've got to say for sure. So I always like to kick things off with just a short intro on you and the journey of Elisabeth Osta to where you are now and what you're up to.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, again, thanks again for inviting me. There is so much happening in the world of data and AI, and it's absolutely important that we keep talking just to understand what's going on from several voices. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity to share my thoughts. And I really think your initiative is super important. So Elisabeth Osta, I've been around the block in data for all my career. I recently founded Digital Transformation, which is an advisory company looking to support chief data officers, but also private equity venture capitalist funds that are looking to invest into this sector. I'm also a visiting fellow at the Judge Business School in Cambridge, and I'm advisor at Data Leader. As you mentioned, my life has been in data, as data has evolved over time. So I've seen data from many different angles, from the retail angle with my time at Danambi with Tesco in terms of how you can bring value to the customers, to Barclays and mobile banking and how data can support better experiences online, to the rise of AI, for instance, for security and cybersecurity to detect anomalies. And most recently, I was a Heineken and how data and AI can support digital transformation in a large manufacturers. I started my life actually in a data company. So doing data product was my first job. And I think I kept going. I've asked myself why I keep going on data, what's so special about it? And I think that the reason of it is that there has been so much transformation. You never get bored because the next corner is bigger and more interesting than the previous one. So I think that's probably what kept me going for so many years in this field.
It's constantly changing, isn't it? I mean, I've been in recruitment for technology recruitment for 17 years, and I've just seen everything evolve. And now AI is here to stay in one shape or form. It is very overwhelming in what what businesses can do with AI and what the benefits are and even what the negatives are, right? So. But thanks very much for the intro. So why did you get into data, first of all? What kind of made you get into this area?
Oh, that goes back to uni. And it was back in the day in terms of understanding how the brain works and making sure that we could code systems that somehow mimic the brain. So we go back from there, and then, sort of it's been all a journey. But to be honest, if I think about back in the day when I was doing parallel distributed processes, to be honest, I would never have imagined that we would have something like ChatGPT like we have today. So I think this rise, that was an intention to have such tools, but I think they've been, to be honest, way faster than what I had ever thought they would be possible. So that's why it's so exciting.
It is, isn't it? I mean, even I'm someone who's I've not programmed or anything, but I'm looking into prompt engineering, and is there anything that I can be learning and doing with ChatGPT? It certainly doesn't seem it's too far away from someone that's not technically minded like myself that can pick things up, which is great. But what businesses can do with smart people like yourself that have got years of experience in data, and what they can implement ideas from GenAI into daily operations is going to be hugely impactful for sure. So thank you so much for the overview. It really leads us nicely onto the evolution of data leadership and how that role is evolving now that Gen AI is here. What are your thoughts?
The role of AI leaders is critical. AI data leaders, I think different organizations have got different constructs, but also increasingly so business leaders. So I think in the past, to an extent, it was easier because you could start from a business problem and then decompose how data or AI at the time could help that specific business problem. And this still holds true, right? So you start with a strategic program, you have a specific target, and then you decompose how data together with other things in digital transformation can help the business to support that goal. At the same time, what has happened is that the capabilities in AI, being that generative AI, being that agentic AI, are going so fast that I think it's almost like we have a capability and now we need to find the problem to solve with the capability. So I think it's a time of business ingenuity and that business mindset that helps to spot an opportunity by having a new capability. I'm hearing from different leaders that this is becoming harder and harder because the capabilities are evolving so fast that it's hard to keep up with, what is the new capability, and then can I use it as it is, yes or no? Do I take the risk? What are the risks? But also, what are the opportunities? So I think we are, so for data leaders, it's, critical moments, so they are super important, but it's also super tough because from one end, there are a number of programs that are already going, they need to continue. At the same time, they need to ensure that they understand these new capabilities, they are abreast of having changes, and their teams are upskilled all the time. And they need to make sure that the organization understands these new capabilities and take a conscious decision whether they want to adopt or not. And then, of course, there is governance. There is the impact on sustainability. So there are many different facets. So if I can reflect, I think it's much harder now. And we just published also as data leaders, the voice of the CDO, and reflecting on the fact that the role of the CDO is becoming more and more complex as it encompasses the data side, but also the transformation of the organization, the upskilling of the teams, and making sure that business value is realized. So which means, again, you keep the boat that you're already driving steady, but at the same time, you need to see how these new big things that are happening all the time, do they help you to change course or accelerate or not? So I think it's indeed a very important time that we're living today.
Yeah, you mentioned about upskilling as well. I mean, it's so important if we're going to, as the world adopts AI, that we don't, we upskill and we don't, have people lose skills. They'll just need to learn new skills, right? But in terms of data leaders, where do you feel like the upskill is needed? What particularly, is it technology? Is it more team leadership style? What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. So in this, if I go back to an example, so we used to have data literacy. They were saying, okay, you need to be able to read charts to understand data. And that's still valid, by the way. I'm not discontinuing. But now with all the generative AI, we don't need to read a chart. We can just interrogate, assuming that we have all the system in place, interrogate an AI agent and ask for data. So, there are a set of skills that we learned that are still valid, but perhaps they're not critical. Whilst I see that there is a lack now of this business ingenuity. It's almost like going back to business skills to say, okay, this is my strategy and this is what I can do with data in the strategy. But the question is my strategy right? Should I think bigger? Should I be bolder? Do I want to take more risk or not? Maybe I went and see, how things happening. So I see that to an extent, there is a widening divide between the, shall we say, the science community, the tech community, and all the startups that are coming with new solutions almost like every day, and the pace of capability that's being built, and the rate of adoption in the business, kind of trying to say, okay, how I use this, what do I use it for? So I think that it's to an extent for those who are not in the tech world, in which case, in the tech world, there's quite a lot of technology skills because they're going so fast. I think it's mostly that capability to understand at very high level what are those capabilities and how do they translate to the business, and could you transform the business? Do you want to transform the business? And I think that is hard. That is harder than back a few years back. It was a matter of visualizing charts. It was an easier challenge than what we have now.
For sure. So I mean, how can data leaders, business owners, founders, how can they ensure they have the right strategy? How can they ensure they have the right strategic alignment?
Yeah, so that's of course, I think this is really where the company needs to come together. And it's not just a specialized department, which is the data department, that defines the right strategy, but it's sort of understanding the different voices in the organization and being quite intentional about the way forward, and also quite intentional about the growth ambition and the risk ambition, because they two come together. So to which extent you want to risk more but maybe grow more, and to which extent you're a bit more cautious in your approach and in your risk profile. But as long as there is an intent, I think that's absolutely fine. But I think it's important that these conversations are getting around the table in boards, at CEOs. And it's also why I'm so keen. So I'm doing training for non-executive directors. I think boards need to understand this much more because they tend to delegate this topic to the technical departments. But I think it's much more of a board discussion as well that needs to take place.
Sure, right. I mean, if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, what the problem is, what the end goal is, then the strategy is not going to be right. Have you seen many? I mean, I guess we don't want to give specific examples, but have you seen really great strategies succeed? Have you seen some really bad ones fail? What was the kind of components to success and failure?
Well, I think I see that every time that there is a willingness to engage, I think it's always the right strategy. And then it needs to be a conscious decision. I go back to the time of Barclays, in which a CEO at the time, it was even before we had mobile banking, when we had the first mobile phone, it was saying, okay, what would it cost to find out? Just, having that curiosity to say, okay, we need to engage with this, and we need to agree on the right way of engaging with this, because not engaging with that is not an option. It's a matter of survival. And I think this is a bit the same in terms of not engaging with this topic is not the right thing. As long as there is a conversation, there are the right decisions, and there is a construct in which this is dealt with, whether it's experimentation, whether there is a separate business unit that goes as fast as they can. So there are multiple ways in which companies can adapt to this in different ways, but I think it's important to take it seriously. I think that's my message. Yeah. So if you look at it, many companies that have survived and thrived in the past obviously had this a bit more curious approach in terms of saying we cannot just let it pass without engaging with it. And at the same time, it's not about something glitzy. It's not just about, a nice maybe demo that you do for investors or the analyst day. So it needs to be something that is fundamental and from one end, it allows you to run the business without skipping a beat, and at the same time, also learn and experiment on how to improve.
Absolutely. I mean, I read a statistic a while ago, which, it's crazy how many these AI transformation programs or AI implementation, even if it be a small chatbot, for example, can fail. What are the typical reasons for that? Is there any reasons for failure? Anything that these our audience should consider when looking at a strategy and thinking, right, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to implement.
So if you look at the numbers, at least the numbers that we read, for instance, from McKinsey, only 3% of companies that are experimenting with generative AI are getting a return of at least 10% of EBIT. And also something like 80% are experimenting. Now, this could be quite valid because we're just at the beginning. So, from one end, you can say, okay, it's fine, people are still experimenting, etc. But I think we go back to what I was referring to earlier. If experimenting is a technical team or a data team trying to do something in isolation, I think it's bound to fail because, these are much more systemic changes in the organization that need to have an intention from the board and the executive team. So I think that's really where I would address the failures as these are kind of isolated experiments that are not really embedded in the fabric of the business and embedded in the strategy of the business in the way that they want to move forward. So I would tend to think that, from one end, having the top team disengage is probably a very good signal of potential future failure. And having everything wrapped up in a data team and they're responsible for everything, I think that is, also a recipe for maybe difficult success.
You was going to say disaster, recipe for disaster.
No, it can still work. I'm not saying, but it would be quite a lot, for this team to pull off. Then, of course, it all depends on culture of the company, the size of the company. It might well, be absolutely, fine. But I'm saying, for particularly the bigger you get, the harder it gets to have significant impact. At the same time, also, I don't think that we should forget the rest of the organization and the shop floor. Because again, sort of same thing, if they're not adopting new tools that are being used, then again, they are not, those tools are not going to drive value by themselves. So I think there is that element of human interaction with the tools and the AI, which is, I find it fascinating, which we haven't fully unpicked. Because at the moment, we're just assuming, okay, we drop a tool and people will engage with it. And we found that, yes, that from a consumer point of view, we're very good at it. From a business point of view, much less so.
Amazing, Elisabeth. So, driving innovation, that's what, businesses are trying to do from, a data leadership perspective. How can we take an advantage of Gen AI?
I think, again, so we need to understand, maybe link it to the current strategies of a company. I think the easiest thing is to look at the strategic programs that the company has that already been vetted, and then see how maybe certain operations could be made much easier for these strategic programs. So another angle is to look at where maybe employees are struggling with certain processes, where there is waste, and maybe sometimes not even within a company, but also in the ecosystem. If I look, for instance, at supply chain, there are so many opportunities to improve some little steps that would then reduce waste and they would improve sustainability. So I think it's a bit of a mindset to look at, from one end, the strategy, but also what does not work. And I think this is in the context of incremental innovation. If you look at what fails and what creates dissatisfaction for customers, it's incremental innovation, but it brings immediate value, because if you fix that, and usually it's easier and contained to fix, then you have an immediate value. So I think that is, that's a low-hanging fruit that everyone should engage with. I think the radical innovation we discussed at the moment, radical innovation is in the tech space. So we have these new capabilities. And therefore, with these new capabilities come different business models. And we saw it earlier with the advent of digitalization, that you had new business models coming in. I could imagine that now is going to be a similar phase in the next few years with generative AI, agentic AI, you might have the new business models. So I think that's a very deeper strategic question of business model that, again, that's more perhaps for the executive team and the board to address.
Sure, and we've got to mention, right, because the listeners need to know this new terminology that I'm trying to get my head around. Frugal AI. Now, you seem very, very knowledgeable around this topic. I'm sure the listeners would love to hear what it is and lay it out for non-techies like me, because it might be hard to understand. But frugal AI, can you talk us through it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I'm super passionate about it. So we start with frugal innovation, and frugal innovation you started already almost like 10 years ago with Professor Jaideep Prabhu. And it was all about innovating in a simple way, innovating when you have a constraint. You don't need to have huge investments, but you look at what you have and you solve for a problem that you have, right? So, and that's been quite successful as a concept. We have 6 principles of frugal innovation, but it's really about, think about having a lot of constraints and not a lot around you, but yet you can bring something that brings quite a lot of value. And now, in the past 6 months, the notion of frugal AI had really expanded quite dramatically. When we think about frugal AI, we think about the following dimensions. First of all, small data sets. So there is a conception that you need to have huge data sets in order to have a model. And now with the new technologies that we have in data science, we can also make models out of small data sets. So if you think of it, that immediately opens up AI for small businesses, because not every company has got huge data sets. But if you can bring good prediction, good AI models also with small data sets, that's, can be quite powerful. The second part is about almost like computing at the edge, and when you have very little computing power. So you don't need to have big computers, but perhaps you can do things with your mobile phone or with very little CPU, right? And that's really important when you are using, for instance, sensors, IoTs. So you can do computing at the edge. And that's, again, we're starting to do in tech. A big realization is that large language models are consuming quite a lot of energy. Data centers and cloud, from an environment point of view, are quite heavy. So there is a whole set of startups that are now setting up to make computing energy efficient. So which means we can use incredible computing power, but with much less energy. And I think that's, I think that's a frontier that everyone is getting super excited, because if you think, you're probably seeing the news of Microsoft acquiring even nuclear power centers to put data centers, and we will get to a point in which it's not sustainable. And so I'm absolutely delighted to see that we have a number of startups in Cambridge and in the world looking at how we can increase the capability of computing without increasing the cost from an energy point of view. And then last, so the frugal AI is really about innovating within constraints. So if you're a small business, you have a constraint, you have a blockage or something, that's really almost like a mindset to say, okay, how can I use AI to solve for this problem? But it's mostly what is the problem? And maybe AI can find a very easy solution for that rather than an expensive one. Just imagine with your phone, you can scan QR codes, you don't need a cashier, and so on and so forth. So I hope that I excited you sufficiently to the concept of frugal AI.
Absolutely. What a game changer. So for SMEs, this is huge. You don't need huge data sets. You can, are we talking extremely small sets? I mean, literally the bare minimum, or,
Yeah, so of course, there are some constraints, but the point is that we want to make sure that these capabilities are available to the business community, and particularly small and medium businesses. So we are holding in Cambridge on the 22nd of November a workshop with the small business community, with startups, with professors, and also big tech players, because we want to bring this sort of close the circle in the ecosystem. Because from one end, we have so much knowledge and capacity, and how can we make sure that knowledge and capacity transfers quite quickly in the business community so that they can expand more quickly without a huge investment and without massive resources? So we know that there is a sense that lack of resources is critical, particularly specialized resources. As you know, data scientists have been very difficult to hire in the past because there was a huge shortage. And to an extent now we're seeing with the rise of these generative AI tools and agentic AI tools, there is less barrier of entry because the AI technology becomes much more democratized. So more people can engage with it without having deep backgrounds. And we think that this could be actually fundamental for businesses to embed AI in their daily lives, but at the same time to grow their businesses and improve their business models.
And I think the massive point about all of this is it's much better energy efficient. Yeah, it is
Absolutely.
so much better for the planet. And it is a scary topic, isn't it? Because there are lots of news topics around, you know, how much energy a simple prompt can take, and it is scary. You know, so having these things in the back of our minds really, really important as we adopt AI, right?
Absolutely. And if you think of it, I feel quite self-conscious whenever I engage with whether it's Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT or any of those models, because you feel, okay, it needs to be a big problem because I'm consuming planet's energy to do this. So it needs to be worthwhile, right? But again, I'm super excited about companies like Orbital Materials and Squish and others that are really working relentlessly as startups to develop these new methodologies so that AI does not take energy or very, very little of it, and it's fully sustainable.
It's like I'm sure there'll be a saying that comes out of this, but you know, prompt guilt maybe. You know, as you're writing a prompt and there's that guilt. Did I need to actually ask you that? Could I have found that out elsewhere? And I think that's a big point for sustainability for sure.
Absolutely, and also Schneider Electric got to the point with the French Association to create some standards and to say, okay, you're using AI, but is AI the only way of doing this, or can you use it, you know, without AI? So, you know, so is the problem big enough? And I think that goes into the conversation of making sure that we're using the right tools for the right size of problems, and not vice versa. We are using big tools for small problems, and then we have big problems and we're using small tools, which sometimes is a bit what is happening today. And then within that, I think there is also the new methodologies in computing and in the data science. And now, essentially, instead of, again, sort of just looking at entirety of data, so there is the injection of rules and human knowledge, which is felt that improves the models quite a lot and makes it much more energy efficient. So from one end, there is the whole more physical element of the CPUs and how data centers work. And from the other, a lot of progress also on how the models work, making sure that we inject human knowledge, that we inject the rules. So we don't every time find out everything through huge amount of data, because certain things are already known. So we need to divide what is already known, which we go back to the old rules engine, but they do the job with very little energy. And then, you know, use data, but only for the things that we really need to find out. So I think a lot of progress there, and it's fascinating to see.
It is, isn't it? And it, you know, as you know, we you know, as a business, Eden Smith, we have our sustainability recruitment arm as well, and we are seeing businesses just really invest in sustainability, being really energy aware. You know, it's great to see that. I think everyone is on board with this, which is great. So any final thoughts for our listeners, because you've given us so much insight? Any business owners, data leaders that are perhaps thinking about, you know, AI, what we can do with it? Is there any final kind of maybe advice, anything you want to share?
Well, I would maybe quote Einstein, overquoted, but imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think this is the time in AI in which imagination is more important than knowledge, and having the dreams and having, you know, sort of some ideas and remaining quite curious to what is happening around us is super important. And then maybe there is another aspect we not perhaps touch upon, but is people. And it's the human interaction with AI, and maybe that also the fact that we know all our jobs are getting more stressful. We see increased rates of burnout, and sometimes sort of we're seeing that jobs are becoming sort of quite of a burden for many people, more from a psychological point of view. So I think I feel that as we are going so fast on the technology side, I think we also need to look a bit more on the human side as well. So what are the costs of from the human side? Not necessarily only in the terms of job losses. And I think it's inevitable that there is going to be a redrawing on the landscape of work. Hard to see exactly, which ways, etc. Hard to make prediction, but it's inevitable that the type of jobs will change significantly in the next few years. But also the quality of work, we've given perhaps too little attention. And I think as leaders in this field, we should really also think about making a human experience that is worth and is valuable. And I think there's perhaps too little attention to that side of things.
Yeah, it's a massive thing, isn't it? Let's not forget why we're here, why businesses have started, not only to generate profit, but to give people opportunity. And we don't want to forget that element, because that's why we're here, right? Everyone wants to kind of build a career, wake up every day, get to work, get going, and keep motivated. But AI, I think the message needs to be AI isn't here to take away, it's here to improve. And it's there will be skills that need to be readjusted. There'll be new roles that are created, which are fantastic, but it does just help businesses run a lot smoother and operate a lot more efficiently. So I'm really excited for the journey, for sure. I think you've been absolutely fantastic, Elisabeth. I say we said in the break that you should have a career in TV, for sure. So I think you've been absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much. Round of applause for Elisabeth. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to another episode of AI Insights with me, Jonathan Blaber, heading up our AI recruitment practice at Eden Smith. If you'd like to find out more, please visit our website, find me on LinkedIn, or email me at jonathan.blaber@edensmith.co.uk. Thanks again for listening.